And District Clerk, do the roll call.
Curry,
Here.
Adel,
Here.
Anderson,
Here.
Avedisian, Lozano, Buell,
Here.
Bush,
Here.
Clark. Commissioner Clark, are you still on the WebEx? See, you're muted. Desai,
Here.
DeBella,
Here.
Drake,
Here.
Gale,
Here.
Ardot,
Here.
Gentile,
Here.
Healy, Hoffman, here, Oheb,
Here.
Holloway,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
LaChance, Lester, Lewis, Magnan,
Here.
Yandyke,
Here.
Maniscalco, Payne,
Here.
Patel,
Here.
Salemi,
Here.
Stuber, Taylor,
Here.
Torres,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Carrier. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Every meeting.
Is there anyone in the audience that would, oh, I'm sorry, approval of minutes of February 5th, 2024?
Moved, Adel.
Seconded.
Any changes, deletions, additions, revisions? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. And now we'll move on to public comments relative to agenda items. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board?
Yes. Yes,
Please.
I would. I would like to.
All right, please state your name and address, please.
My name is Alma Elder, and I'm with an organization, Third Act. And I would like to hear some discussion with agenda item 9B. And that has to do with renting of real estate to a company where 3 carbonate fuel cell power plants are going to be installed, or planned to be installed. That is not wind power cell power. That is not solar power. That is carbonate fuel cell power. And I have some concerns in this day and age. We are all very aware of the vicissitudes of climate and the risks with drought and the risks with too much flooding and too many greenhouse gases going up into the atmosphere. And I would like to hear some discussion what MDC feels is their policy about permitting this cell power plant to be installed there. It sounds like a big one. They want 3 of them put in there. And I would like to know what process does MDC use? I looked up on the internet about this fuel cell power plant, and they say that the plant's electrochemical process results in electricity, heat, and water with the ability to recycle carbon dioxide. Well, I wonder, I would like to hear in this discussion about how are they planning to recycle the carbon dioxide? And I would just like to have more understanding about what is MDC's approach and policy about the use of greenhouse gases like this and the support of it. So I hope that comes up in the agenda discussion. Thank you for allowing me
Thank
this
you.
time to speak.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Hearing none, seeing none, move on to reports from district chairman. I had an opportunity last week to meet with the mayor and town manager from West Hartford, along with 4 of the 5 MDC commissioners. I think it was a very positive meeting. And we talked about a lot of issues coming up that the board is going to be discussing, whether it be technology, possibility of regional stormwater authority, and some of the other issues that directly impact West Hartford. So I think it was a good meeting and a good start. And I plan on reaching out and getting with all the mayors, and if towns have a town manager, with them as well. So thank you. And report from our CEO.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a few items. I'll go quickly through them. If there's any questions, happy to answer questions. The first one, just a reminder, I did mention this at the BPW meeting, but there is a public annual report meeting on the Clean Water Project for the North Hartford area on March 14th at 6 p.m. here. It's a WEBEX. So we invite everybody to come. Julie, do you have that picture of the office? So we just have a quick picture of the rendering of the new office on Barber Street. This will be our outreach office. And we were hoping to have everything done this week, but it'll probably be next week before we're complete. So we are going to have this office up and running. We're going to schedule a ribbon cutting, probably pretty busy in this March, but this late March or early April. So soon to come there. I would like to sure have a date here. But we, as usual, every year we support the Special Olympics up in Windsor at the Eversource facilities. And we did that again this year. I think they had over 500 athletes. And we donated 642,000 gallons to make snow and those kinds of things. So we've been doing that every year. Also, Raw Water Master Plan, I mentioned this the last meeting. We're scheduled for the 26th at 9 a.m. down at the training facility. We're going to be meeting with the town engineers and the town managers to talk through the Water Master Plan that we presented here at the board and at the Water Bureau. And then here, we've also talked about the scheduling of a Stormwater Authority discussion. And we're trying to get that done for now early April, hopefully the first week of April. I have had, I've mentioned this before, discussions with Matt Hart, who's the executive director of CROG, on numerous occasions. CROG actually is working on something as well. They've identified 38 towns and they're trying to talk through this issue on stormwater. It's not just the Hartford region, it's a major issue for all the regions. So we will invite them as well. MS4 permitting here with the city of Hartford. We're working internally with our staff and the city's working with their staff. We're hopeful to have a meeting the week of the 11th so that we can develop and draft and finalize the MOU, which EPA and the state of Connecticut is expecting us to achieve. So we're working diligently on that with the new administration. You might have seen in the packet that Nick sends around is a bunch of articles that occurred throughout the month. There was an article regarding water and PFAS, and so it's a hot topic everywhere across the country. It's a big discussion. I did meet with the first selectman of Portland. Portland's agreement to purchase water from the MDC through a wholesale agreement expires in 2025. And they received $250,000 grant from the state of Connecticut DPH to explore drilling a new well, which would allow them, their goal for a long time has been to divorce themselves from the MDC. The discussion we had was, with them was, what is the pros and cons of them divorcing themselves from the MDC? One is our rate is $2 cheaper than their rate. They do have to maintain the system. They do have 3 employees. So there's an expense there that they will always have. But there is a challenge that they have with an aging system. They have a take or pay contract, which is they must take at least 400,000 gallons a day, and they can take up to 1.1 million gallons per day by the diversion permit. The concern and what I expressed to the first selectman was that, you know, if you decide to go away from the MDC in 2025, then we would remove that diversion permit. If they're only taking 400,000 gallons a day and they can take up to 1.1, there's 700,000 gallons a day that we can't sell to anybody else. So I reminded him that if they were sort of go that way, then we would be expecting that diversion permit to be changed so that we could sell that water to somebody else. And then once you get rid of that diversion permit, you'll never get it back, because if everyone might remember, in the 2000s, late 1990, 98, 99, Farmington River Watershed Association interfered in our diversion permit. And as part of that, that's where that 1.1 million gallons per day limitation is. So if you lose that diversion permit, they'll never get it back. And the concern that they have is you never know. You could drill a brand new well, 1 million to 2 million gallons a day. And with all the regulations coming down on PFAS, we don't know what they're going to be. But in the next 3 years, well after this contract expires, there could be some severe PFAS regulations that, you know, they may struggle to meet. So, you know, they understand that, and they're interested in continuing to talk with us. So we will continue that conversation. There was an article last week on dam safety, and I know a lot of people heard about the dam issue in Norwich. And the report identifies MDC's Reservoir 1 dam as being in a poor condition. So I want to clarify that. I asked the engineer, our engineering department, and engineer GZA, who is our engineer that does the dam safety reporting every 2 years, to clarify what that poor means. And in this case, the dam Resi 1 is not a drinking water reservoir, so we don't need the infrastructure to pass water through it. The poor does not mean that the dam is in any way, going to collapse. What the poor rating is specifically associated with is that the mouth of the spillway, Deep believes that it should be larger based on the maximum potential flood, which is 10 times the 100-year storm. So it's a very theoretical process, but I just want to make sure and clarify to the board that the dam is not going to fail. Also, there was another identification of the emergency action plan not being approved, and that's because there's some information that we have in section 3 that needs to be in section 9. So we're clarifying and fixing that, but I just want to make sure I address that tonight. And then we have number 7 here. Chris Stone and I, and Chris will address this as well, but Chris and I went down to DC last week, and we had a great meeting with our delegation, really to talk about the Army Corps agreement and the importance of the MDC getting out of the agreement, and the support that we need from our delegation to get out of that agreement. So it was a very, very good meeting. We talked a lot about the reasons why, and I've highlighted in letters that I've sent to the March 10th letter, which I think you have, March 10th, 2021, April 11th, 2022. If you don't have those, I'll send these to you. But we focused on those issues, the facts that the MDC 8-member town should not be paying for something that is providing a benefit to the entire state of Connecticut. And the biggest concern we have is besides the fact that we believe gouged, since 2015 up to $900,000 a year. Now we just received the bill 2 to 3 weeks ago for this past year. It's $240,000. So we believe that we shouldn't be have been paying $900,000 a year for a number of years, and that the contract has expired in January of 2019, and we believe that we're not asking to be reimbursed, but we are asking to be let out of the contract through congressional language. So very supportive. Surprisingly heard some things that were very supportive on the Army Corps side. So, Chris and I have a conference call with the Army Corps local regional office up here in Concord, Mass, tomorrow. And hopefully they're supportive of our efforts. And the main goal is obviously to get the word of billing language in that Congress approves. And I'll let Chris talk a little bit specifically about that. But more importantly, we also want to be able to, in good faith, work with the Army Corps and the environmental groups to make sure that we can address the regime flow, the flow of the river this coming April through early summer. And so that's been a big issue for the last number of years because the Army Corps is releasing water, feast or famine. They're not releasing it the way we used to release it. And even the way that the MDC used to release it raised concerns from Farmington River Watershed, Rivers Alliance. And so there's a way to do this in a better fashion, and we're committed to making that happen. So it was a very positive trip. We're very happy for that. I want to just thank Chris and Steve Bonafonte did a great job just prepping and keeping our delegation up to speed on all the facts. So thank you for that. Let me just see. And then we've got just two more things. We are having a national conference. Connecticut, Hartford's been selected to have the WEF conference, the Water Environmental Federation. So it's a wastewater organization, and the conference is here in Hartford. And I'll be opening up the general session and speaking on behalf of the MDC. So we're excited about that, and our staff will be presenting at this conference as well. And also, I was just invited to on behalf of NACWA to present at the May 1st meeting in Providence. So that's my report.
That's it?
That's it.
Where's that, in this convention center?
Yes, convention center.
What is it?
Are there any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Salami.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Commissioner Salami. Scott, just a quick question. Is there any record of this spillway not being adequate? I mean,
No,
where'd that come from? I'm trying to understand that, but there's no record of the water, like ever getting over the top of the dam or even getting close to it. So if there's no record of that, what, this is strictly a theoretical application or something?
yes, if I may, Scott Chelson. So what they have done is they have changed the design standards. So the margin of safety, the critical factor used to be a design factor of 1.25, and they've changed that to over 2. So just by doing that, and it's not deep that has done this. This is just an industry standard. But by doing that, you change everything, right? So we are, planning. This is a timing issue for us. As we said before in the master plan, there's a lot of things that we need to do at the West Hartford filter plant, but we got to start doing our master planning first. And we can't really work on the Reservoir 1 until we get the filter beds out of functioning, the 22 filter beds. So it's a timing issue. We're aware of that. DPH is aware of that. But we will expand the mouth of that spillway, but it's going to be a timing issue for within the master plan.
Yeah, my question is that like a significant cost for us to do that? I mean, it would seem like it would be a capital expense, in order to do something like that. So
Yeah,
it's not something we were planning on before.
Yeah, no, we were. Yeah, yes, this is a planned activity. We did renovate a few of the dams right within the West Hartford filter back in 2013, Chris? 11, 13. And that was about 2 dam systems, about $2.5 million. So there's some benefits because like we had to drain number 2. And that was a process that we had to drain that reservoir in order for us to fix the spillway. Here, we're going to be draining Reservoir 1, but we're also, as part of our master plan, is we want to line the water mains that are under Resi 1. So there's a benefit. But I don't think we have a cost estimate yet, Chris, on that.
Yeah, spillways over $1 million. To expand the channel going down there, it's pretty. But the work involves other work associated with the plant. That's just a timing issue, as Scott spoke to.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that it sounds like a mandate that we have to do it, and that it's significant cost with no historical reason for doing it other than the change in the
Back to safety. But, it'll get done. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, report from District Counsel Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Stone, a couple of preliminary items before I have, we have our lobbyists here. They're going to give a brief presentation. On the Colebrook issue, I won't repeat what Scott went over. I just want to say thank you to Steve Bonafonte and all the hard work that has done and is doing in Washington on this issue. Every meeting we went to last week went off on time without a hitch. Our team was well prepared. The people at Patton Boggs, your federal lobbyist, along with Steve, were prepared. And Scott didn't say it, but I'll say it. We heard from the clerk for or an aide for one of our U.S. senators, and the statement was made that the Army Corps of Engineers at the federal level supports our amendment to get out of the contract. So that was good news. Obviously, there's still work to be done. We're not resting on that. There's still some things that we're working on that hopefully will ensure that it's not only that the amendment that has already been drafted, that the amendment gets on the bill and that the bill passes this fall. The other thing we're working on is the easement for that was part of the abandonment process that we went through with DPH, the conservation easement. The difficulty in that process, not impossible, but somewhat difficult, is while we can identify in the aggregate how many acres we have in Connecticut and how many acres we have in Massachusetts that could be subject to this conservation easement, those aggregated that block of land is divided up into about 200 parcels of land, separate parcels. So you have to, we've gone through a painstaking exercise, primarily Carl Nasto in our office, to identify not just the overall area, but also each piece, each parcel that contributes to that aggregate area. So that's been an exercise. It's ongoing. We're almost there, but we have to identify obviously the properties that are affected by the easement in order to move forward without having to, I'll say, unsubdivide the property and make it one parcel. We don't want to do that. So we're working on that. We've also met at the state level with stakeholders on the issue of the regime flow. What do we do when the MDC leaves? The water doesn't go away, right? The water's still there, the 10 billion gallons of water. What happens? How do we regulate, manage the flow of water from the Colebrook River Reservoir Dam in order to achieve three purposes, riparian rights that we have an obligation to comply with. We have an obligation to comply either with water or with cash in lieu of water. Secondly, the Army Corps of Engineers desire to maintain certain flood control measures and a flood control system for which because of which the Colebrook Dam was built in the first place. So that's second. And then the third, and most important to our fellow stakeholders within the state of Connecticut, is how do we regulate the flow of water downstream down the west branch of the Farmington River to make sure that the businesses, the individual homeowners thrive in a healthy west branch of the Farmington River, not just for recreation purposes, but we're not going to over discharge water and flood perhaps people along the way. So it's a balance that we have to achieve. We've achieved it for the number of years that we've been there. through people like Tim Anthony, who found the sweet spot and was able to manage the flows so that everybody was satisfied with the amount of water that they were either allowed to withhold, i.e. the Army Corps, or release MDC and the stakeholders along the West Branch. So we continue to meet with them. As Scott pointed out, we have a meeting tomorrow morning, a remote meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers locally. And it's all part of that process. Eventually, as we promised our colleagues or our friends in Washington, we intend to meet with everybody and on a series of meetings between now and the fall to develop that revised, if necessary, regime flow. The landfill, we're waiting on the lawsuit. We're waiting for a hearing before the State Claims Commissioner on our second claim. First claim, as you know, is in litigation now. We've started a new collection protocol within our department. We have historically collected on delinquent water bills. There are several delinquent sewer assessments that have been where we've liened properties on the sewer side that we're stepping up our collection on those, even if it comes to having to go to foreclosure. I find that most times when a minority lien holder, someone behind the mortgage goes to foreclose, the bank steps in and pays the minority lien holder because they don't want to lose their interest in the property. So that being said, we're developing a protocol for that. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to foreclose on $500 or $1,000 liens. This is for the substantial liens that total several hundred thousands of dollars, where and sometimes it's a homeowner, most times it's a business. They'll enter into a voluntary sewer lien, get their hookup, pay the first year's bill, and we don't see anything from them since after that. Fortunately, we have liens on the property, so we're secured, but just letting them sit there is not the answer, right? So we're gonna proceed with that, continue with that process. Steve's helping us on that. And then finally, I'll call up Brendan Fox, who's with Gaffney Bennett. Also here, if you'd stand when I call your name. Janice Fleming is here, one of our state lobbyists. Mike Chris, the newest member of the team, is one of our lobbyists, the former state rep from the great town of East Hartford. And Steve Bonafante, who's not on the state side anymore, but he's not on the state side because he's too busy on the federal side, but you all know Steve and all that he does for us. So with that, there's a couple bills, Brendan, that I want you to talk about, and then if there's any questions that any of the commissioners might have, we can address those.
Sure. Brendan, before you start, just to separate a bit, are there any questions from Attorney Stone regarding his presentation? Commissioner Patel?
There was an article about many properties in Hartford in delinquency. Are we there attached to those properties? And if they ignore millions of dollars of Hartford, they will continue ignoring ours. So I think we have to develop some teeth in our regulations to collect it.
Well, that's interesting. You should mention that, Commissioner. Chris Stone, that many of the properties, I shouldn't say many, some of the properties that are on that list are names that are familiar to Steve Bonafante and me. In the second floor, Jess Fenner and her people and Kelly's people on the collection side, they're repeat offenders. And you know, we have certain priority. It's second in line to the U.S. taxes. It's third in line to municipal taxes and state taxes. But we have a priority over mortgages that might be filed before us, that other liens that might be filed before us, because we collect our delinquent water bills and water liens with the same priority that municipal taxes would have. Okay, so with that, we've been very successful, and you know what you've been able to accomplish over the past 2 or 3 years with passing on the cost of collection to the delinquent ratepayer. Number one. Number two, being aggressive. We have a team of 5 outside counsel that are aggressive and get paid their fee, not by you, but by the delinquent ratepayer, because not just every water bill that goes unpaid falls on customers like you and me, to make up the difference, but also the costs associated with collecting the money in that. So we've stepped up that. And as you know, we give a year-end report each year. We gave one in the end of 2023. We want to reach that point where we're at zero. We're at zero in terms of expenses, but we're collecting all the money that we're owed, but we don't have to pay out of pocket new money to collect those. So short answer to your question is we're watching those. We understand that we have to wait on some priority, but if we start to foreclose on those sewer assessments that are of significant amounts, then that's going to hopefully push the property owner to start paying their bills. I hope that answered your question. It's probably too long an answer, Commissioner, but I apologize. Brendan? Anyone else have any questions? I'm sorry, Bill.
Is that, you're talking about nonprofits that pay on the sewer assessments?
No, it's most of them are not nonprofits. No, they're going to be a subdivider of property. They're going to be commercial properties that have changed use, for example. And we've got an increase in use or intensification of use from an office building to a residential. Those we've been tackling, as you know, pretty aggressively. And it's businesses that will or multifamily residences that will construct new facilities. They hook up, they pay the first year, they hook up, they get their hookup. We file our voluntary lien on the property so they know they're liened. They sign an agreement acknowledging that they know they're liened, and they don't pay after year one.
And obviously, most of those aren't residential.
Most of those aren't residential. Some of them have gotten to the point where the amount of the interest and the late charges that are attached to the bill, the assessment, exceed the amount of the original assessment. So it makes no economic sense to me why they do what they do. Particularly now, our 6% interest rate on our sewer assessments is on the low side in a commercial setting. So,
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Payne here. I just want to thank District Council Stone and his entire team. I've noticed that the collection rate has been increasing without having any additional expense to us. So great job. Thank you to all your staff members.
thank you. And
And the
it's
attorney.
this board that authorized that. So you all get credit for that too. Thank you, though.
Any other questions? All right, I have one, Chris.
Yeah.
Do we have a policy or guidelines to determine when, at what point we address with putting somebody on a foreclosure list? For example, East Hartford has a minimum number of years or a minimum value that automatically moves them from one list to the other.
Yeah.
Do we have anything like that?
That's one. We're right now we're trying to attack the low hanging fruit with where we get the highest, the greatest bang for our buck, so to speak. So we're not foreclosing on, hypothetically, say there's 100 delinquent accounts. I think there's more, but let's say there's 100. We're not going to 100. We've got a say the top 20 that we're going after to basically 20, see what happens, see how we make out. And then we'll develop along the way, something along the lines that you're suggesting, Mr. Chairman, some sort of protocol, because we don't want, first of all, we don't want to own property, right? We're not in the business of owning single family homes. So we don't necessarily need to evict people from their property.
Handle state issues up at the state capitol on behalf of the MDC, and then Steve Bonifante, who addresses issues in Washington on behalf of the MDC. Generally speaking, this year is a short session. For those who are not acquainted with it, a short session means that the session begins in February. It began about 1 month ago, and it will conclude in early May 8th this year. I think technically the General Assembly is limited to focusing on issues that affect the budget. Sort of after 1 year of the 2-year budget being in place, this is the opportunity to make some corrections. That doesn't happen anymore. What happens is that you really have almost the same amount of activity that you see in a long session, just truncated in a short session, which is fine. There are several bills that we're watching and tracking on behalf of the MDC. I'm going to talk about 3 bills in particular tonight that are directly focused on the MDC. The first bill is one that Chris made mention of. It's a bill that was raised in the Environment Committee. It's entitled, "An Act Concerning the Water Resources of the Upper Farmington River Valley." The sponsors of this bill are three. One, Representative Mark Anderson from Granby and Barkhamsted. Two is Representative Jay Case from Barkhamsted Seminara. There talks about the Commissioner of DEP doing a study on land, on watershed land out there, and then there is a reference to the releases. So we will work with them. The news that Scott and Chris have shared tonight, I think, will be very helpful in our dealings with them up at the state capitol. The second bill is a bill that was raised by Senator Derek Slapp. This is in Planning and Development. It's Senate Bill 336. This impacts the independent consumer advocate. What Derek is seeking to do in this bill is increase the compensation that is paid to the consumer advocate from $50,000 compensation that is paid to the consumer advocate from $50,000 a year to $70,000 a year. You may recall that when the consumer advocate came into existence in 2017, that initial year, that was the compensation paid to the consumer advocate. There was additional compensation provided to allow him, David Silverstone, to get up to speed and ramp up. And he also had to expend his own personal resources. So that was compensation for that. It's gone back to $50,000, and Derek Slapp seeks to increase it to $70,000. There is also another change in the bill that is troubling, in my opinion. What he seeks to do right now under existing legislation, the consumer advocate has the opportunity to seek an increase outside of the legislative process if he makes a compelling case for increased compensation, not permanent, but probably sort of one-shot revenue increases or compensation increases. Today, he has to make that case to this board. And under the bill, what Derek Slapp is seeking to do is remove that authority from this board and transfer it over to the Consumer Council. I've indicated to Derek that that is troubling. Derek suggested to me that it's necessary for that to happen in order to have true independence of the consumer advocate. So that is going to be something that we continue to debate with Derek Slapp. The third bill, and this bill, by the way, is being heard in front of the Planning and Development Committee on Wednesday of this week. And the prior bill, the Upper Farmington River Valley bill, will be heard in the Environment Committee on Friday of this week. The third bill is a bill that, quite frankly, is not new to us. It's a bill that was raised by both Representative Tom Delmicky and Senator Derek Slapp in the past. It seeks to do several things for the MDC. Would transfer audit responsibilities over to the Office of the State Auditor. It would set up a task force to examine the MDC charter and its organization and operations and make suggested changes. It would excuse me for a second.
Is the right to vote on water rates in there, Brendan?
Yeah. Yes. The non-member towns, their commissioners would have the right to vote on water rates, limited on the budget, limited to just water rates. He's seeking that. That is important to Representative Delmicky. And also it would mandate the MDC to adopt a code of ethics, which the MDC already has done on its own. So that bill emerged last year from the Planning and Development Committee. It sat on the House calendar and didn't move from there. We will testify and we will express our concerns. We have in the past, we've sought changes to our own charter that would bring certain bonding provisions up currently into the 21st century so that we're more aligned with other cities and towns, we've asked for that to be considered as well. So again, on Wednesday, we certainly will express our opposition, as we have done in the past, to the bill that is before that committee. We may suggest that that bill be stripped and be used as a vehicle for some bonding changes that we seek to do. Again, it remains to be seen where it goes.
Thank you, Brendan.
Questions?
I have a question.
Michelle?
The parties who are pushing for these changes, which are adverse to MDC, where do they live? What interest do they have? Do they have any conflict of interest? Are they pushing for some entities?
Commissioner, Senator Representative Tom Delmicky is a representative from South Windsor. He is really advocating. So again, his biggest issue out of all of the issues that he would put on the table, his biggest issue would be for the non-member towns, their commissioners, to have the right to vote on water rates. And that obviously would apply to South Windsor. I won't suggest that he's advocating for some other organization. I think he really is advocating for South Windsor and in its capacity as a non-member town. Senator Derek Slapp is the state senator from the town of West Hartford. And, you know, I don't think he's advocating on behalf of other organizations. This issue apparently is important to him. And that's it. The other three, with regard to the Farmington River Valley bill, those elected officials do not represent any MDC town. I think, quite frankly, they are advocating for the Farmington River Alliance and fishermen organizations and things of that sort.
Any other questions?
Who is advocating to authorize special counsel to make all decision on fees on their own? Who is pushing for that?
I can answer that, Brendan. If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Stone. Joe Sheriko, the present independent consumer advocate for the MDC, has indicated that he no longer wants to serve in that position. His term expired on December 31st, 2023. Prior to that expiration date, he had advised the Connecticut Consumer Counsel's Office of his decision. They went out to RFQ to get a response because they needed to fill the position. Joe was leaving, right? No responses. Zero. They think that if they raise the amount of money that is available to a independent consumer advocate, that may trigger more, at least some response to an RFQ. I don't know if that's true or not. I will tell you that and you know this because you've been here while he's been here, while that position's been here. We've had at least one occasion, maybe two, where particularly when we were working on the integrated plan and trying to get that approved and all that was happening with the Clean Water Project and the changes and all that. There was a time where I think it was Attorney Silverstone had asked for an additional monies to reflect the additional amount of time that and I believe, I could be wrong, that you gave some consideration for that. That being said, my big concern with the bill, and listen, I think 50 grand's enough, but that'll be up. Honestly, that's kind of outside our control. If they want to do it, they'll do it. But my concern is the long-term control. We went back when this position was created. We came to you, and there were a lot of things in the bill that created Public Act 17.1. A lot of things that were in that bill, in addition to the consumer advocate. Some things that we wanted. So we signed off on the consumer advocate language in its entirety. And one of those parts of that part of the bill was the funding, that we controlled the funding. It was set at an amount, and any increases would be subject to action by the MDC. We've never, to say now that changing the funding authority, not the funding source, the authority from the MDC board to the Consumer Council to say that's on the basis of maintaining impartiality. The Consumer Council, and we've all seen it and been witness to it and have worked with the Consumer Council. They're independent and they're impartial, whether it's Attorney Silverstone or the present Joe Shreko. Thank you, Joe Shreko. There's nothing that they've done or complained to anybody that somehow the funding mechanisms for that position affects their impartiality. I don't know where that's coming from. It would be the only case, I can't think of any other cases, let's put it this way, where an outside source controls the budget of the NDC. And I have a problem with it. Brendan's expressed his problem. I sense that there may be a problem within this room. We're going to testify on that. It just came out of nowhere, but.
Can we not?
Hold on, Commissioner. Commissioner Salemi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Salemi here. And Brendan, it's good to see you. And so with respect, and I think Council Stone is absolutely right, about this. I mean, for somebody else to decide how much we're going to pay the Consumer Council is like funding a wish list, somebody else's wish list, mandating that we fund somebody else's wish list. But I don't think it's ever affected their relationship with us in any way. As Chris said, they're independent. With respect to Representative Delnicki's this too, about his sort of quest for non-member towns to have a vote somewhere. Well, and I would suggest that they do with respect to the Board of Finance, which does have oversight over the rates that we charge and everything. But I don't know if he's still asking for actual representation for each one of the non-member towns, or I mean, which that's 4 votes, and then Portland's still not part of that. So they're not a non-member town, but but is that what he's asking for? 4 votes?
Yeah, yes, Commissioner. Again, as we all appreciate, he's not asking for additional seats, but for the 4 non-member town commissioners who are, connected to this board, that they have the limited right, that those 4 people have the limited right when it comes to the budget to vote on the water rate and the water rate alone. So that's what he's asking for.
Okay, I would say that I would argue that the citizen members have the ability to represent the ratepayers, no matter who they are or where they're from. But that's just my opinion. But
Commissioner Patel?
They said that they did not get volunteers to become Consumer Council. Can our towns assist in suggesting names and create a pool so they can pick? Create a mechanism so it is there for them to pick. We are not involved. Our towns can suggest names.
Any other questions? Commissioner DeBella?
Brendan, relative to the auditors of public accounts, who's paying for the audit that they're proposing?
I believe, Commissioner, that would be a state expense. I'd have to look at that.
I think it is a state expense. Is there a fiscal note on it?
No, not yet.
Yeah, but if you look at the fiscal note from last year, it's the same bill.
It's about
Yeah.
500,000.
So the fiscal note, excuse me, I'm sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chairman, but Chris Stone, District Council, the fiscal note from last year's bill was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's 2 types of audit they do. They do a cursory audit, which costs, they said they can do within existing funds, and then they do a full audit, which is what we do anyway. That would cost them several $100,000, but that was the cost. And that's what the latter, the more extensive audit, is what the proponent of the bill, at least last year, wanted to accomplish.
Correct.
I believe that fiscal note's pretty close to $500,000. That's the reason I raised that question. I had some conversations on that a couple of days ago. And they're not actually set up to do that kind of an audit, the auditors of public.
No, last year, they indicated privately, they never went on the record, but last year indicated that they certainly wouldn't seek this additional responsibility. And again, the bill failed last year. But you're correct. There is a significant fiscal impact if a bill like this were to go into effect to the state.
Thank you, Brendan.
Any other questions? I have just one, not really a question, but a comment that concerning consumer advocate. For some reason, I was under the impression that when the consumer advocate leaves the position, for all intents and purposes, we're posting, somebody's posting for a replacement. And I was always under the impression that, like any job posting with any salary scale, that any new consumer advocate coming in to be able to catch up was going to get that 70,000 the first year anyway. I'm thinking that's not correct.
That's not correct.
Okay.
Joe, I know that in the transition from Silverstone to Shreko, 50 grand. It wasn't this. The reason why Silverstone got the additional 20 initially, number one, he started in November 1st instead of January 1st. And he had to set up a website and do some other hardware type things to get up and running. So that's why he got more.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Thank you all. Thank you guys and gals, Janice, Michael and Steve for coming as well.
All right, we'll move on to number 9 on the agenda, the Bureau of Public Works. Consideration and potential action for an encroachment agreement, Wilson Park, 458 Windsor Avenue, East Hartford. Yes, Commissioner? Commissioner Hoffman?
Mr. Chairman, just to report on the on deliberations for Public Works, we took both item A and B and moved those forward without objection. They were unanimous.
Am I missing something on my agenda? I see an A and a B.
Correct.
I don't see a C.
No, I said two.
Oh,
A and B.
I think I said. Yeah.
all right. I'm going to ask that we handle them separately
Oh, sure.
because there may be separate motions pertaining to item B. So Chair will entertain a motion on item A of number 9.
So
Second.
Discussion?
This is item A.
Hey,
Item A, the encroachment on Wilson Park. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Move on to item B on number 9, potential real estate lease at 235 Brainard Road, Hartford. Commissioner Hoffman, would you like to address that or?
oh, we had staff give us a presentation of what was being requested and how it would affect MDC. And I believe Mr. Jellison gave that presentation and there were no, we did have some interaction, but there was no objection at the end. So it was unanimous vote to move it forward.
Okay, for discussion purposes, Chair would like to have a motion.
So move.
Second.
All right, well, before I take questions, why don't I ask Scott to give us a brief summary of what he gave to Public Works.
Yeah, we have Michael Palmer is on the phone. Michael, are you there? Michael Palmer? We can just go to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Michael, you there?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay, well, we're just gonna put up the, a couple of slides here, and this is what we presented at BPW. So Michael approached me, they had developed can you go to the first slide on the Homestead Avenue? They had, as most of you know, the state of Connecticut and through PURA dictate that utilities have a certain percentage of, let's call it green power, within their portfolio. We did this we won a ZREC program for our solar project at Quantic, 2 acres of solar. This was a project that was planned to be built on Homestead Avenue with the fuel cell company, specifically with Eversource. They did not have enough natural gas any natural gas at this location on Homestead. So they were looking for a site that could accommodate the natural gas needs of this facility. This is just a picture of what it looks like, the footprint, and relatively small footprint. Mike, you want to just step in here and introduce yourself and explain your project?
Sure thing. No problem. I'm Mike Palmer with Fuel Cell Energy. What we have here is, as Mr. Jellison described there, this was a project that was entered into the state and is approved by the state boards about not quite 5 years ago to help meet the RPS standards required by the state. Fuel cells within this state are considered a Class 1 renewable and therefore meet the requirements for the RPS standards. So the original project was sized at 7.4 megawatts for the RPS standards back then. And then about 2 years later, we added another megawatt because the state asked us to look at more ways of doing this. The agreement is actually with both Eversource and UI, Eversource being an 80% recipient and UI being a 20%, which reflects their size in the state. The 3 units that you see there are set up in such a way, and you'll notice on the right side of that picture, there's a big space. The intent was, but that was the idea, so that's why there's space there. Again, the problem we had with this site.
Mike, excuse me, you broke up between the 3 units we see and what the intent is. Can you repeat
no
that?
problem. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, the 3 units that we have there, you'll notice that space to the right of them. We actually sized and designed the site for a 4th unit for a future potential. It's not a guarantee or none of that. It was just sized that way, just so you can see it. The issue with that site was the sheer fact that there was a misstep in working with the local gas company and figuring out the volume of gas that would be necessary, and they couldn't deliver it. So what we're doing right now, and the reason why I approached the MDC, is we really need an option to lease a site, because to move the actual project, we have to go back to the 2 utility companies, Eversource and UI, ask them if they're okay with moving the site. If they are, we then approach it to Deep and Pura and ask them, can we move the incentive that was awarded to a new site? And then at that point, we would then talk to the MDC or the site owner and discuss a potential lease to lease a certain amount of land to put these on. What we're asking for right now is actually just an option to lease. And that option to lease can go either way by either party. It's just to show both the utilities as well as the state agencies that we have a site that's willing to work with us at least, and not just, not that we don't have a site.
So Mike, this is Scott Jellison. Just to clarify, and I said this at BPW, there's no guarantee that this project goes forward, right? This is,
none.
So can you just explain what you're looking for in terms of an option to lease? Can you kind of clarify what you're asking for? And how the specifics of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's fairly simple. The option to lease basically is a document that we can take to both the utilities as well as the state agencies and say, we have a real project and we have a site owner who's willing to work with us to talk about leasing a site. It doesn't guarantee the project will go through. All it says is you have some kind of site control, meaning that we would have access if the state agrees to allow us to even start negotiating a contract. And so it's purely just a document that says we've talked to a landowner. The landowner is, considering it and is not against the idea.
And so in that, just to go to the next slide, Julie, I'm sorry, Julie's. So, we tried to, obviously the goal is to look for a site that's got the gas capacity for their needs. If you this is just a little shot of 231 Brainard, which is down to the right is the wastewater treatment plant. To the left is 231 Brainard, and that dirt zone is our construction laid out area for our tunnel. That area is much larger than the needs. They have told us they need about 1/2 to 3/4 of an acre to do their project. They had offered, upwards of $300,000. Is a chart there that shows 350 the first 5 years, and this is a annual lease payment to the MDC. The goal here would be to and I'll refer to Chris Stone on the lease, the actual language on the lease, as to what our involvement is and what our approval. We're not building or we're not operating a fuel cell facility. Mike, can you talk a little bit about your approval of the fuel cell energy in general as it relates to the state program and who you're talking with and who approves that?
Sure. Yeah, no, as I mentioned, I mean, the programs themselves are legislated by the state, so they're run and managed by either or DEEP and or Pura, right? Either one is a combination of the two mainly right now. They're instituted by them, or I should say overseen. The utilities themselves manage the program. So we would be providing power to the utilities so the utilities can meet the RPS standards that have been put in place. And Pura and DEEP then look at the projects that are submitted that are underneath these incentives and approve one or the other. Now, this project was approved for that site, and it was through our misstep that we did not verify the amount of gas available. But Pura had approved this to be a viable project to deliver, 8.4 megawatts in total to the RPS standards. So that's where that stood. Now, going forward, as you mentioned, what we put to the MDC was a sample of what we would expect to see. Right now, again, we're just asking for an option to lease, meaning a discussion to put a lease in. And it's purely for land only. The MDC would not own and or operate these units. We would take care of that, very similar to our situations that we have down in Bridgeport in the city of Derby. Those two sites are owned and operated by us. Well, one of them is owned by somebody else, but we do all the O&M. They're not owned by the city. The towns they can get a payment of some kind for support as well as the lease to the landowner. So that's, I think that not sure if I answered that question 100%.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Commissioner DeBella.
So this is a request for an option to purchase, or I'm sorry, to lease. We aren't approving a lease. We're approving that we have an interest in talking to them and coming to terms. There's no actual physical fiscal commitment on this or terms commitment. That's what.
Correct, correct.
And what would happen is, if in fact they move forward, they would come back to us, we negotiate a lease, our attorney would approve it, and we come back to the board for finality.
Yes, to all of Scott Jellison. My understanding through what Mike has said, though, is they've got to get Pura and Deep to even approve the project. So it could never happen, right? It's if all of that works out and Deep and Pura approve the project, this project would move forward. But the lease, from what Mike's asking for, and I think what we're willing to do would be to have a discussion about a possible lease.
All I'm saying, there's no commitment to a lease, just the issue that we'd be willing to discuss it. That's not what it says here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look at this as there are two things that are, I guess three things that are important to the fuel cell company. One is that they have a piece of property that may host their facility. Two, what is it going to cost them? And three, for how long is it going to cost them? This is designed, as I read this, particularly with the caveats set forth in the resolved portion of the resolution, designed to get them in the queue, to get them to at least be able to discuss with Pura this site as a potential end site for this fuel cell technology. There's when you look at the resolved sections, and I'm a little bit, not a little bit, I'm uncomfortable with having the final lease be subject to what I think you guys and you ladies think should be in the lease. This is a potentially initially a 20-year term, could be a 40-year term, and God forbid I make a mistake and don't include something that you want to include or included something you didn't want to include. So what I envision happening here is, if you were to approve this resolution tonight, that I will put that in a form to the fuel cell people that they can take to Pura to get in the queue. We can either work on the terms of the lease between now and whenever, or we can wait until they get to the whenever point, which is when they're actually approved for a site, talk about it then. But I'm not going to, whatever lease my office develops as the lease for this 20-year, potentially 40-year period of time, I'm going to insist that it comes back to the board. And whether it comes back to the board through other subcommittees or not, Mr. Chairman, that's up to you. But it's going to come back to the board with your input and if we get to that point, hopefully with your approval on what this lease is going to look like. So that's how I think, for whatever it's worth, this playing out.
Sounds odd, the way they do this.
They got to get in front of Pura. That's the problem. They got to get.
Commissioner Torres?
Yes, we had extensive discussion on this at the committee. And I think there was a sense that nothing was going to happen in terms of the final agreement of any kind until the firm got the okay to proceed, to begin to have a conversation with the MDC. And we have brought up a number of issues that we were concerned about, and they were addressed by counsel, that all those things would be, part of our discussion, and any questions or concerns that the MDC might have would be addressed through that lease. So all it does is allows them the opportunity to go back to the state agencies to allow them to say, okay, we'll give you the okay to go and talk to that potential lease entity. That's all it does. At that point in time, then, we can begin to talk about all of the details. At the committee, we talked about the environmental issues, environmental impact. the cost, what benefits might accrue to the MDC, what potential obstacles there might be with our own operations in the area. So all of those things, I think, were addressed. And the committee felt comfortable enough to say, you know what, let them go forward and at least get the approval from the state so that we can talk about this. That's all it is. And so I would, recommend and suggest that we move this forward and let them go ahead and see if they can get approval to talk about moving from the original site to potentially a site in the south, on our property, which is quite frankly a small parcel of land which is right now not used other than for storing some things out in the open. So I would suggest that we move forward with this. It's not a whole lot we can really talk about other than allowing them to go back to the state and see if they'll get approval to talk to us.
Any other questions?
Mike.
Mr. DeBella?
Yeah. Mike, Bill DeBella, you'd have to negotiate a PPA with Eversource, I would assume. That's part of the process.
Yeah, the actual project itself already has a tariff agreement in place. And the problem is, since we lost the site, we can't move it without approval. So in theory, the Homestead location was approved back almost 5 years ago. And not in theory, actuality, it was approved. And it was agreed upon by both the utilities and as well as ourselves, between the two parties, and the state approved it, PURA approved it. The problem happens when the fact that, well, we can't build it there. So now we have to, right, exactly. So now we have to go back and move the site. Now, moving the site is not necessarily an easy thing because these were, state incentives that were put out there under different procedures. I mean, the MDC probably knows the ZREC program, things like that, very similar to those. So it's not an easy ask when we ask Pura and the Deep to say, well, can we just move it? Right. So it's one of those things where, and several of you have said it much better than I have. What we're asking for is just the ability to go to the state agencies and even talk to them about possibly moving the project. If they say yes, well, then we come to the MDC and say, can we talk about possibly putting a site there? It's not, there's no guarantee or nothing that you're signing would ever state you have to put anything on the property.
Mr. DeBella?
Just one last question. There was a question raised by a individual in the opening of the meeting that discussed the question of decarbonization and the fact that natural gas was being used in the process of creating the electrical capacity. Could you just address that? Because I understand what it is, but put it in simpler terms that this is not a decarbonization. It is not a carbonization or decarbonization situation from an environmental standpoint.
Yeah, no, well, what it is every fuel cell out there operates on hydrogen, and there's very few ways to get hydrogen. One being using methane or natural gas and reforming it. When you do that, there is a carbon atom that gets split off of it that needs to be emitted. That's part of it. Now, that also happens with traditional generation equipment. And traditional generation equipment typically runs in a combustion system, meaning it's burnt. So when you burn it, you have even more emissions. This unit will have less CO2 than a traditional combustion unit. It also has virtually no NOx, SOx particulate, and those are for like acid rain, different types of respiratory issues, things like that. So that's why the state looks at these units as a class 1 renewable. The energy density of these things, if you tried to compare it to a solar farm, if you needed 8 megawatts of solar panels to actually produce a consistent 8 megawatts, you need more than an 8 megawatt nameplate solar panels in the state of Connecticut. You would probably need closer to 3 times that, which is a significant amount of land. This space that we're asking for maxes out at about 32,000 square feet. You can't do that with a solar. So do we decarbonize? Yes, it's decreased. It's not zero, but it's decreased. Now, the technology also has the capability of carbon capture. The issue with that is you have to have a place to either put it or use it. In the future, it can do that. These units are going to be, the project would be, because of the state incentive, a 20-year project. That we don't see it going any longer than that. The carbonate technology is looked at as part of a transition strategy, to get to that point where you eventually have enough green hydrogen available to operate units such as these. But until then, all we have is natural gas. And yes, there is a small emission, but we do our best to try to keep it as clean as possible.
So
Any other question? Mike, I have a question for you, actually several. Can you tell us how the base rent numbers were arrived at?
That was purely from a standpoint of looking at what's the typical industrial square footage rate. And our people tend to look at it from, and I think I had talked to Scott about this, Mr. Jellison, and some of his people. Typically we've seen rates of anywhere from $10 to $15 a square foot, and that's based on differing things. And that's where negotiating a lease comes into play.
And have you provided any documentation for those numbers in terms of what's happening around the state or around New England?
No, our people just monitor, the real estate issues. I didn't have any real documentation around it other than what we put in the option to lease to mention. I think we mentioned it in there. Also, the documentation I gave you in this overview, I think there was a statement of the $10 to $15 estimate. That's where we would expect us to be when we negotiate a lease. If we go over that, we probably won't do the project anyway. So,
is there enough gas to support a fourth unit?
Yes, I checked specifically with the gas company, the local EDC for gas, or the local gas distribution company, and there is more than enough gas there for 4 units, as well as all the other facilities in the area.
Do you have any other similar agreements with anyone else in Connecticut?
Yes, we have an agreement down. We just started up a new one in Derby. There's actually 2 locations in Derby. There's also the larger park, which is actually 5 of these units in Bridgeport. There's other units around the state. Most of them are with private entities, not municipals or government entities, but there's quite a few of them. We have several colleges, some private, manufacturing and industrial type companies, hospital, and not only ourselves, but there are also other companies that do fuel cells that are out there as well doing this. Connecticut has always been very pro fuel cell. So that's why there's quite a few of these projects around.
And MDC has not seen any of these, the rents for these various parcels of property?
No.
part of negotiation.
Have any of these parcels done approval for potential lease or actually approved a lease?
Well, the ones that we're actually operating on, yes, obviously they had to. Those are all in contract operating units.
And can we see the numbers for those?
I'd have to check to be sure. I mean, it's a lease with somebody else, so I just have to check. I'm more than happy to verify that with our people as to whether they could share those numbers. May be able to give you a range better than anything else, but that's, I can check. But that type of discussion typically doesn't happen until we get to the actual lease.
Well, you get the numbers,
right, which we're not at yet. So,
and my next question would be for Attorney Stone. Should we enter into a possible lease agreement? Is this property in any way tied up in perpetuity or until they determine that they're going to lease it or not lease it?
Chris Stone, District Council, I would suggest that we put a date certain on when a lease has to be either completed or not. And by completed, I mean not only drafted, but approved by this body and whatever sub-bureaus it might be referred to. So there'd be an end date to those negotiations that we can all target. I just, if I might, Mr. Chairman, Mike, this is Chris Stone. Do you have any agreements with other governmental agencies for the leasing of property?
Municipals, yes. Derby is one of them.
So those are public documents, so you could probably get us a copy of that lease, right?
Yeah, probably. I don't have it at my hands, put it that way.
Okay. And then the only other thing I have, Mr. Chairman, is that have you suggested, and just so I don't want to get it clear, that the base rent that's set forth in item 3 of the agenda memo is a target, but not a set number?
In the optional lease, it is not set in stone. It's a target where we'd like to be, obviously. But you know,
it remains
past
negotiable.
projects, right? Exactly. That would be a starting point for us.
Okay, thank you.
So let me ask my final 2 questions and I'll get
Sorry,
back to
Don. Yes,
Chris, for you, would we also include that there would be no ability for Fuel Cells Inc. to sublet to a third party?
Yes.
Okay. And for you, Mike, these rent numbers predicated on 3 units or 4 or 5 or whatever fits?
Well, yeah, the rent number is based on the 32,000 square foot space that we need, and that would encompass a potential 4 units. The intent is to only put in 3 at this point in time. It would give the future flexibility of adding a 4th unit, whether that be for use locally, being on the site, or for use in the RPS standards, being grid feed. We don't know, but that was the space we would require. It's based on the square footage, is the simple answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Gale?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. John Gale. How much time will you need to get the various approvals before you would be coming back to us to enter into a full-scale lease?
Yeah, as Mr. Stone stated earlier too, typically with our options to lease, we have those out to maybe 18 months with the potential to renew if both parties agree. But typically, if we don't do something with that option to lease, meaning come up with an actual lease within 18 months, the project's most likely not going to happen. So the simple answer is 18 months. We would know on this specific project, we probably know within a few months, a couple of months, just because it's been out there for so long.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to amend the resolved clause in this resolution to say that the Chief Executive Officer is authorized to enter into an option to lease not to exceed 18 months with 1 potential 6-month extension.
Before I entertain a second, is there any other conversation?
Yes, Commissioner Ricardo. We see the isometric drawing of the 3 items on Homestead Avenue, and across the street from there, I looked in the map and there's a substation. Is there any other kind of infrastructure that needs to be installed to put this on the grid, or you just run it out to a pole on or underground, to what's that road there? Brainard Road.
Yeah, we would run it out to probably the local distribution level, which not the pole level, but the actual transmission level, which is closer to 13 inch. So we try to find the closest one of that. If we can't, we then do it at a lower level. But we've looked at the site. There is transmission line available in the area. It's not that far away.
Right behind us.
It would be very simple. We would run it underground. We don't run overhead wires, only if you absolutely have to based on site. All of that is dictated by the interconnection agreement with the local distribution company anyway. But we run everything underground. So,
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I have at least one more question. Mike, are any of your lease agreements open, or are they for full 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
none of them
In
are
other words,
longer than 20 years. Yeah.
Any of them shorter
None
than
of them
20
are
years?
some of them, trying to think right now. Some of them have less than 20 years left on them, but when they started, they were probably 20 years. Most of them match the incentives, and the incentives are 20 years. Back a few years back when they had the LREC incentive, that one was actually only 15 years. So there's a couple of them out there that will be 15 years.
Your option.
My final concern is that the resolution, and I'm not opposed to this project, but I just have concerns where it doesn't appear that we've had an opportunity to vet numbers, comparisons with other municipalities or other businesses. And you look at the resolve section, the first one, it says subject to the above enumerated terms and conditions, which would include the rent. And I'm not sure we're at that point yet where without some
on the same item for like
recorded documents, hang on just a second, that we can move forward with that. Is that?
You might be interested. They were talking about Pure. And
Was that a commissioner?
I got it.
Yes. Who?
It was Magna. I viewed it.
Magnan? Commissioner Magnan, you're on the line. It's tough to pick your voice up.
I just muted her.
Oh.
I think it was an invert.
Okay. Commissioner Desai, did you have a question?
Yes, Chairman. Are there any byproducts or anything that would be discharged from the facility or anything like that, just from the process perspective?
No, other than the typical exhaust, the only other byproduct is water, which is safe to go into the local sewer system.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Commissioner Gale, would you like to put that amendment or any other amendments on the floor?
Sure, I'll put that. Well, let me just say before addressing the amendment once again that day job here is as a lawyer, and in that capacity, an option to lease is never binding. It's an option. So it doesn't mean we'd have to accept anything. And Council Stone could correct me, but my understanding of an option is it doesn't matter that it says $10.94 per square foot. We're not necessarily agreeing to that. We're agreeing to have a further conversation about that. And if indeed, Attorney Stone, you agree with that, I would just limit my amendment to putting a time constraint in here that the option agreement, to answer the question somebody raised as to whether it was open-ended, that, you know, we're only bound to negotiate with them through an 18-month period with one potential 6-month extension, which I think is the timing that Mike suggested he needed to come back to us to get that lease.
Excuse me. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, Mike, you explained this product has already been approved at Homestead Avenue by the state, deep by Pura. It was because of the lack of gas. So the project has been put in front of the regulators. And you mentioned that, you know, we should know within 2 to 3 months whether or not this is actually going to go forward or not. And I think you also said that 18 months was to actually get through an actual final lease, not the option to lease. So is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, this was an approved.
So my question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, do we really need 18 months to determine whether or not this product is going to even go forward with Pura and with the state? Could we limit that to that this option is only good for, pick a number, 6 months? You should know within 6 months whether or not this is gonna move forward, right?
Yeah, no, and I'm more than happy to amend that to say, the options for 6 months with the ability, if both parties had agreed, to extend it for another 6 months, right? Just in case. Because to be honest, I never know with deep and pura how long they may take. It should be a simple couple of month, 3 month type process. But to be honest, I never know.
Happy to amend my motion, Madam, Mr. Chair, sorry. Happy to amend my motion to say 6 months and with a 6 month extension.
We'll take that as a friendly.
Second.
motion.
I'll second that.
I think we're overkilling. Are we overkilling this thing? I mean, my God, why do we care about timeframes? We don't even have to do this. We just said we're open to it. And my personal opinion is if someone came to me and said, give me $350,000, put that in my 3/4 acre backyard, I'd say yes. And if McDonald's came in and said, give us $350,000, I say yes. I mean, we're just open for, we're open for a lease. This should be a 5-minute conversation.
We've got a resolution that has a resolution that responds to a.
Right. I say vote yes.
Go ahead.
Don't need timeframes.
That's the right
If
question.
I might, Mr. Chairman, I'll be mercifully brief, I hope. Chris Stone, not that it matters to me, but I'm okay with that amendment, but I'm a little concerned about the other language in the resolution. It's the first resolved. And I've asked, and he's been very candid, Mike's been very candid, that this is just our goal, right? This is our goal. Our target is this lease. But the language that troubles me is that the first resolved starting on the second line, third line, excuse me, subject to the above enumerated terms and conditions. So you're being asked, you're being asked to approve those terms and conditions. And my understanding is from talking to Mike tonight, and subject to further information that we're going to get, that's not what
We don't have to execute it.
again, but my suggestion is respectfully that you change that to starting with the second line after the word Inc., that it would be upon and subject to and generally consistent with the foregoing terms and conditions, and that those terms and conditions district council deems appropriate in the best interest of the MDC. So it gives that language that is not binding, and it gives Mike some comfort level that that's the target.
Sounds so much better. Commissioner Gale.
I'll take Attorney Stone's suggestion and amend my motion to also include the language as follows: such terms and conditions as may be mutually agreed by the parties.
That makes it both sides.
Both sides, whatever terms, it's an option on what such terms and conditions as may be mutually agreed by the parties.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
And let me ask District Clerk Myrtle if he actually has all of this. I have one question, follow up with your comments, Chris.
Yep.
You indicated based on council's approval. Doesn't have to come back to the board for approval.
Come back.
This is just on the option. This is just the option part of it. Any final lease has to come back to this board.
It's mutually agreeable to both parties.
Has to be anyway.
Any other discussion, questions? All in favor of the motion as amended, please say aye. Aye. And opposed? Motion carried. Move on now to number 11.
10.
Oh, 10, I'm sorry. Water Bureau I'm trying. Water Bureau, consideration of potential action, EPA lead and copper rule and authorization for replacement. Customers' private water service lines containing lead or copper.
Chairman?
Yes.
Water Bureau reviewed this topic extensively. Scott made a very good presentation about what they've done so far to see how much we're in compliance with the lead and copper rule and made some forward-looking suggestions and came to this amendment, or not amendment, this idea of fixing some of the properties we've found so far, but going a little bit beyond that. So we all agreed unanimously with this idea.
Commissioner Salemi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly intend to,
Mr. Salemi, could I first ask for a motion so we can have discussion?
Move it, Doc.
yeah, I thought Andy did that. I'm sorry, but I'll move, I'll move. So.
Well, Andy, did you want to make the motion?
No, that's okay.
Ah. All right, we have a motion and second. Go ahead, Commissioner Salemi.
Yeah, I certainly intend to support the resolution. The only issue that I have is, you know, it's, is there any estimate of the extent to which this problem exists throughout the district? And looking down the road, you know, is the expectation that the cost of these things will be borne by the MDC and all its customers, or because it's work that's going to be done on private property and on, it says, you know, basically private portion of the customer's water service lines. My understanding is that we own the lines up to the meter. But even though it may be on private property, are we talking about the same thing? I just want to make sure that I thought I understood this before, but I want to make sure I do. So Scott, from the curb cock to the house and the meter in the house, we own that pipe. That's our pipe, right?
Go ahead, Madam Chair. So we, and I apologize for the confusion, but at the Water Bureau, as Commissioner Adler indicated. So what we are asking for is really simple. The lead and copper rule has changed. Flint, Michigan, 2014 took 10 years to make those changes. Now they made changes and they said, you water utilities must go out and verify what your water services to the home from the street to the property line, and then from the property line to the home. We have to verify what that material is. So the first step in the process is we go through all of our record drawings and all of our cards in utility services and customer service, and trying to verify what material are those two components. If we have the records of what they are, we're good. In those cases, we've analyzed 80% of our 160,000 services, and 80%, a lot of other details that go into that, but that's what we're asking for and pay for it. The reason why we're asking to pay for it is because DPH has said under this program that there's a 70% subsidy, which will, the MDC will, if we had lead on our side, and most likely it's not lead, it's a gooseneck coming off the main, a lead gooseneck. We had pictures of that at the last meeting. If we have that, we can replace our section right up into the curb stop, as you said, and we'll get 70% grant for that work in Hartford and East Hartford. Other communities, we get 30% grant, but we'll get 70% grant with a catch. You have to replace the service to the home in order to get 70% for your side. If we don't replace the service to the home free, we don't get 70% grant for our side. So it's in our best interest. It's a terrible messaging. And there are water companies out there that are saying, we're not going to replace the private property side because it's not ours. And we don't, it's true. We don't own the private property side, but can you imagine the messaging that the MDC would say, we found lead on our side. We know there's lead on your side, and good luck. I mean, it's just not the right thing to do. So if you're talking about 80,000, 80% of 160,000 units, we've only found 7. You know, Commissioner, to your question, what's the remaining 25,000? I don't know, but odds are it's going to be the same range as, you know, when we were looking at Flint, Michigan, 2014, we found records here at the MDC in like 1908 or whatever it was. It was Hartford, City of Hartford. And there were resolutions that said that the MDC would, or the city would not use lead service pipes back then. So we don't know what we're going to find in the other 25,000, but we're going to get 70% grant. What we're really asking tonight is not about the grant. It's not about the funding. It's about, should the MDC replace the service from the street property line to the home for free? And this is, our recommendation is yes.
Okay, well, that was my, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that was my question. What we're asking tonight is to have the district council draft an ordinance authorizing the district to replace the private portion of customers' water service. My question was, we're actually talking about fixing something we don't own. It's beyond what we own. That was really my question. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And the second part of it is just a thought that, you know, this looks like a mandate from EPA. Last time we got a big mandate from EPA, we've already spent over $2 billion working on that. So, you know, just want to make sure that, you know, what are we looking at with this? But you've answered my question. You did before too at the water. But so it's not every water service, but there are some water services out there that may not be the appropriate material and may have an issue with this. I mean, I know in East Hartford, there was a whole section of homes that were built during the Second World War, and there wasn't any copper available, so they had galvanized steel water mains. They've all been replaced because they all rotted and leaked, and you know. But there's probably issues out there. So, but I just want to make sure that, you know, we're looking for an ordinance that allows us to actually work on private property and replace privately owned equipment because the EPA has suggested that we should be doing that. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll move on to number 11. Personal Pension Insurance Committee consideration potential action, and you can delete appointment of legislative consultants on that, number 11. That was an error. But we've got 2 pages. We've got seven job specs open for approval. Chair will entertain a motion. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, I would move, I would ask that we consider items A and B together. These items basically were covered quite well in PP&I, and they really relate to our continued collapsing of job classifications and reorienting our way of looking at bringing new people in, and also what the succession ladder is in terms of these positions that are enumerated here. It was approved unanimously at PP&I. And if you have any questions, Jamie?
Okay, first, without objection, we'll do all 7 at once. Without objection, Jamie?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jamie Harlow from HR. I don't know if there are any specific questions or I can give you a brief overview. Commissioner Taylor gave a good overview. Items A were all actually part of the 184 negotiations, and it was just, we had to negotiate the details further. So that is just kind of bringing those negotiations to full resolution with the adoption of those. A crew leader is combining we have currently 2 existing WPC crew leaders. It would be consolidating it into one multitasking role. And then the 2 operator in trainings, which we've talked about. The title, it's a little awkward, but it is an industry standard to use operator in training. I've referenced these job titles at a couple of the other meetings that we've discussed, and it's an opportunity to get people in at a more entry level. And then items B, again, are just simply updates to existing job descriptions that we have. The first three are, we've now been functioning about a year under the 3713 job descriptions, the first attempt at the multitasking. And these three jobs, they're the jobs that we consolidated the most in terms of compressing jobs. And we just wanted to tweak the language a little bit to include, to give a little bit more flexibility in the recruitment process. And then the risks management administrator position was part of a job evaluation request that we had from an employee, which is a formal process that we have here. And it's a recommendation simply to change the grade from a 13 to a 14 under the exempt and excluded group, which would align that position also with all of our other administrator positions within the district. Hopefully that was brief enough, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Questions? Commissioner Godo?
Yes, Commissioner Gardo. Have all these been worked through with the bargaining units, or does that happen later?
Nope, they are 100% worked through with the bargaining unit before I bring them to PP&I. So they all accept these job
I
descriptions.
missed that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All in favor? Aye. And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, next up is request for information for employee climate study. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, this was, it's a heated discussion and debate within PP&I, but it was approved unanimously. This basically is an effort on our part, basically, to really ask our employees. We've gone through a number of changes here. And it's been a long time since we've queried them as to what they think. And this is an effort in effect to do this. This basically is a request for information. In other words, we are going to go out and ask people to provide us the appropriate information as to the nature of the study and what they think that they can provide us.
Commissioner Taylor, that was through putting out an RFI, correct?
RFI, yes.
Chair will entertain a motion for discussion.
So moved.
Second. Questions? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Before we move on to possible executive session, I just want to remind the commissioners that with the consent of the chairs of Bureau of Public Works and the Water Bureau, we moved, and many of you know that because you serve on one or the other. We went from 6 meetings to 12, and with the consent of the chairs of PPI and Finance, we went from 4 to 6. And the intent of that was to avoid special sessions and eliminate those from being more the norm than an anomaly. And the purpose for that was to get them off of having these meetings at the same date as the district meeting. So what I'm suggesting to everyone is that when you get the district board meeting minutes and you're not on one of these committees, you can go on the website, MDC's website, and you can view and listen to the meeting. And it's great because you can fast forward through it, just pick up what you want to pick up. But it'll give you an opportunity to come to the district board meeting with the same information that the committee members received. So, all right. We need to go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Stone, as to item 11D and item 12 and 13. D is they're all settlement of claims, one dealing with a workers' comp claim, 12 dealing with the existing lawsuit that we brought, and 13 with a lawsuit as well. So,
yes,
please.
Yeah. Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for all 3 items.
Move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Chris, who would you like in attendance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need anybody unless you do.
They can all,
Yeah.
they can all go home.
Yeah.
Jamie, Jamie, you want to do the retiree? That's all. Yeah, you can just stay for that, and then you can leave for the other. You get the other 2.
Yeah, you guys can go, Chris and Kelly, you guys. Tom?
Come on, guys, you could have left an hour ago.
Thank you, though. Thank you, Rita.
There was a motion. Did we vote to go into executive session?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, this is John Myrtle. Are there any commissioners that are on the WebEx via phone number? I see Commissioners Desai, Hoheb, Lewis, Clark, and Magnan are on the WebEx. Is there any other commissioner present on the WebEx remotely?
They have to switch over, John?
Anyone that's on the WebEx, we're going to move you into a breakout session. You don't need to do anything. You'll get moved over automatically.
That's new, John, isn't it?
I paused it.
Yeah.
Yeah, waiting for somebody. People didn't come back automatically.
You're home, that's fine.
I was yeah. They had it though.
I'm gonna be invited back.
Right. Some kind of way. Yeah.
More than one.
I didn't want to ask the question out of the minute and not to
Chairman, just as an aside, Commissioner Bush and I were just wondering, has anyone heard Judy Allen?
I think she's on.
Her name was up there. Try not to encourage it.
Oh, good, okay. We hadn't seen her in a couple of meetings, so.
John, can we go back in? Yeah. Chair will entertain a motion to go back into regular session. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. All right, we will take resolution, move to 11D, workers' comp settlement for Keith Slaughter. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move the item.
Second, that was approved at the PP&I.
Yeah, Slaughter was PP&I.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? All in favor? Oh,
Aye.
Sorry, Commissioner Taylor?
That was approved already.
Oh, it was already approved. Oh, that's why I don't have a resolution then. We're just double checking. Yeah, the board needs to. Yeah. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Aye.
Move on now to number 12, Metropolitan District versus Ludlow Construction, number 2. Chair will entertain a motion. Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And number 13, special action pending litigation, Metropolitan District versus Marriott International. Chair will entertain a motion. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Now to number 14, opportunity for general public comments. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Hearing none. Move on to, now to think of this. 15, commissioner requests for future agenda items. Hearing none, chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That bad boy.
You have these things out.